Hello, everyone, and welcome into today's edition of To The Point Podcast. Everybody's doing well. I'm your host, Noah Warren. And fun show yesterday. If you missed it, you can find it podcast on Facebook, all of the above. Seamus came in studio, had a great time with him. Always great to see him. We do this once a week. We've never done it in person, so that was fun to have him come in here in the studio. Chop it up with him and just to chat about some different things. So I think we'll do that again in the future. We'll have some more guests in studio. Waiting on some mics to come in that I ordered a long time ago. But Amazon, for all the great that Jeff Bezos does in the world, go to space, overcharge on things. But he provides a lot of great products as well. So we're waiting on those mics to come in. And we'll get a better look at our guests next time. But it was a pretty good start to in-studio guests. Lots to get into today. We're going to talk about the Players' Championship. Had a rain delay, but just starting up before I came to the studio. Talk about the conference championships in NCAA. We'll touch on that briefly today. We'll get into more of it tomorrow, where Matt Wright joins me. We'll talk about the tournament, preview March Madness, which starts Thursday, and get into Duke, Kentucky, all the teams that you need to know about before the start of the tournament a week from today. But I wanted to start with the news of the last 30 minutes, and that is that Major League Baseball and the Players Association, the union, have reached a tentative agreement to end the lockout, meaning that baseball should be on the horizon in the not too distant future, meaning, it's March 10th, as I look at the bottom of my computer, because I really did not know the date. March 10th, I think in a month's time, hopefully, maybe a little more, we should see some baseball. That's a positive thing. I was very much prepared to talk about what was pushing, stopping this agreement from happening. And really, the luxury tax, $232 million, which is what the players asked for. It looks like it's going to get there. $710,000 minimum salary for players. I mentioned last week, guys in that 60% range where they won't get the salary arbitration. They won't get to free agency in their career. So that is what they'll be making. That's the minimum salary. And just as we could get into minutia of ownership and players and all the money they're making. But this is a good thing. $710,000, that's the minimum salary in hockey. Well, it's $700,000, the $10,000 more. But this is good. I'm happiest about this of all of it, because I don't feel sympathy for Max Scherzer. I don't feel sympathy for some owner in Cincinnati that I couldn't even tell you what he owns, what he looks like, what his name is, and quite frankly, I could give a shit. But for that player on the team that you root for, and you're like, he had a good run, then he tails off and he's gone, and you don't even remember him. Well, at least he's making a good salary. He's making a minimum salary that he can support his family. That's what guys on fourth lines in the NHL are making, $700,000. It's a pretty good payment. They get to do what they want. And I'm happiest about that. The pre-arbitration pool, the luxury tax, what guys I'm happiest about that. I'm happy that there's that set in place. To be honest, I don't know how we're in 2022 and there isn't at least a minimum salary, a certain paycheck that every guy, every player, every man or woman is not guaranteed. You look at golf, you look at tennis. That is a more stressful sport than any of the major big four. I'm talking baseball, hockey, football, basketball. Because you need to win to get paid. It's not like you go into it, you get it. If you get into a tournament, you get a certain amount of money. But if you want to be paid well, if you want to guarantee yourself money, you need to win. Golfers every year, you might start with a tour card. You have a bad year, you're on the fringe, you're on the Corn Ferry, you're playing for your livelihood. You're playing paycheck to paycheck. You hear a lot of stories about how guys drive from course to course, and there's not that in baseball. You're on a charter plane. You're with the team. You're staying in a hotel. So you are in a better position. But it's nice for those players that are making minimum salary, that they're set up. They're in a better spot. So I'm happy to hear that today. But yesterday, Major League Baseball pushed opening day to April 14th. So March 14th is Monday. It's Thursday night. So if they can get this signed throughout the weekend, I think baseball should be looking at it this way. Have players to their spring training location by Monday. It's Thursday. You have 3 days to figure it out. So that's three days to get your family situation, get a hotel, get an apartment, whatever you have to do to be comfortable in Florida or in Arizona, depending on the Grapefruit League or the Cactus League. Get down there. Starts Monday. Workouts, pitchers and catchers start working. And I heard it was going to be 4 weeks for 4 weeks of play for spring training for guys to be ready. Well, I mean, if you lose if they play 156 games this season, that's not a terrible thing. And to be quite honest, if they get a deal done today, if the deal comes through, they're going to play 162 because they're just going to do it with doubleheaders. That's my guess anyway. 6 games, you can fit in a couple doubleheaders. You get Yankees, Blue Jays, just for instance, have a doubleheader on a Saturday afternoon, and you'll do that a few times during the season. Teams will figure it out. They did it during the bubble, during the first COVID lockdown. They can have a few this year, and then there'll be other ones, of course, with rain delays and different factors. But I think they will play 162 this year, despite the fact that they pushed back 2 weeks. And the reason I say that is Rob Manfred can say it. Owners can pretend like it's real. But do they want to miss out on home dates? No, because that takes away revenue from them. That takes away concessions. This baseball season, and we're starting to see in hockey, it was always in football, but you're starting to see the floodgates open. On Monday in New Brunswick, you don't have to wear a mask anymore if you don't want to. You're 100% capacity in Ontario. 100%. I think you can go. Went to a Wildcat game a few weeks ago, but restrictions have changed since. I think in the queue you can have 100% capacity. So the world's changing. Whether people think it's a good thing or a bad thing is irrelevant at this point. It is. And I think baseball, people are finally getting out of their little cocoon. They're finally getting out of what life was, where it was just you can't leave the house, fear, fake news, all this shit. So now it's, okay, we feel safer about this. It was 2 years of we can't do anything. We got to be afraid. I think baseball attendance is going to be sky high. Maybe this lockout will affect it at the beginning, but that happens every year in baseball. Attendance in April is not good because most of these markets, the weather stinks. Nobody's going to a game at Wrigley in April because guess what? It might be snowing. It's going to be extremely cold. It's not a fun environment to go to. And, you'll go see the end of the Blackhawks season. You'll go see the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs. So there's other things. But as you get down, as the weather improves, I think baseball's attendance will be better than it has in a long time. Because people are going to be looking to do things. I just think in the area here in New Brunswick, the closest team, unless you want to fly to Toronto, but you can drive to go see the Red Sox. I think a lot of people will be going to Boston this summer to catch a weekend series. Maybe watch the Jays in Boston, whatever it is. But so despite it getting pushed back, I do think we'll see 162 games this season. It's good that baseball is back. I'll be honest. I think spring training is too long. I don't watch every spring training game because I can't. And Quite frankly, the season getting pushed back hurts spring training a little bit, hurts baseball a little bit, because if, say, it starts the 14th, which I could see it starting that day, they might not want to start the season. I don't know what the 14th falls on. If it falls on a Monday, they won't want to start the season on a Monday, which I understand. But basketball playoffs are ongoing April 14th. The NHL season's wrapping up. You have the Masters in there. So it's not the greatest spot, but because there's a whole lot of things happening. But 28 days, maybe you can start a few before. Maybe you can start the weekend before. The 8th to the 12th, I think, is the Masters weekend. Maybe baseball can get going then, because if you only need 28 days and not 31 to get a season going, if you can have pitchers, catchers, all the players report to their spring training location by Monday, which I think is completely fair, you give them a few days to get their affairs in order, you can get your season going pretty quick. And things are, if it happens, people show up, a lot of things are going to start happening. Baseball will have some headlines because there's 200 free agents still available. One being Freddie Freeman, who I talked about on Monday. But 200 guys are there. A lot of these guys are going to get signed. Some might get minor league contracts. Some are going to get spring training invites. And how does that shake out? Who goes where? Who earns a roster spot out of camp? So it's going to be fast and furious, because you're going to want your guys in. You want your pitchers. Players haven't been able to negotiate with teams since Christmas. Since before Christmas, there's been zero communication. And I honestly believe that there hasn't. We know there's tampering in sports, but I listened to a guy I really trusted, that in Ken Rosenthal. The guy knows everything. And he said, there's no tampering right now. There's no chatter between agents and teams, because you get caught doing it, you're going to face a heavy fine. There's a lot of lockout talk. It's a lot of contentiousness. The last thing you want to do, if you're Scott Boras, if you're one of these big agencies, is get caught with your hand in the cookie jar. Get the deal done. Players are happy. Then start talking to teams. Then if you're Scott Boras, say, okay, well, Freddie Freeman, for example, where do you want to go? Doesn't look like Atlanta was going to give you the money you wanted. You want to be a Yankee? You want to be a Blue Jay, even though I don't think that's going to happen or a realistic possibility? Where do you want to go? And you have that chat, you start talking to teams, but that can only happen when a deal's done. But there's a lot of guys like a Freddie Freeman that need a contract, that need to figure out where they're going to go. So with this happening, news will be coming in on baseball, on what's happening. There's already an article out. Go figure. The lockout is over. What moves can the Blue Jays make to become true contenders? Those will be happening. To me, I'm going to do a big study on baseball. I did a little bit, but to get ready for the seasons, I always do my deep dive. The Blue Jays got Kevin Gausman. I think that was a really good pickup. But if it was me, Freddie Freeman's not priority. If you can get another pitcher, another really strong man coming out of the bullpen, that's my focus. That's where I look at it and say, this is where this team can be pushed over the edge, where this team can be an elite contender. Because I think the AL East is tough, but it's not so scary that you really have to worry. The Yankees are a good team. They made the playoffs the last 5 years, despite Yankees fans clamoring for Aaron Boone to be fired. They're good. The Red Sox made the AL championship series last year, but they were a team that caught fire. I don't know if anybody says, okay, the Red Sox are going to go back there. They had one of the worst starting pitching staffs of any team that ever got to an AL championship series. Rays had a great regular season, but they flamed out in the playoffs. So what are they going to do? I'm kind of looking through, this. And the Blue Jays had a good offseason. They got Kevin Gausman. He had a career year in San Francisco. How's he going to respond to that? Everybody was fantastic in San Francisco last year, and I mean everyone. Gausman was right there. But it seemed like every player that played there, Anthony DeSclafani, he was another pitcher that was a guy in Cincinnati that it was in Baltimore briefly. It looked like his career was over. Gets to San Francisco, has a 3.30 ERA. Got a long-term extension to stay in San Francisco. But you look at it, Manoah, awesome starter. I think the guy's going to be really good. But you have Gausman and you have Barrios in front of him. I think Barrios is your opening day pitcher. I think you re-signed him long-term. He chose to stay in Toronto. You got to like his game. You still have Hyun-Jin Ryu. I think he's your number 4 behind Manoah, Gausman, and Barrios. But could you add a 5th starter? There's no Tanner Roark anymore. There's no Chase Anderson, thankfully. Steven Matz is gone. Ross Stripling is still in Toronto, but all I hear is about, can we get Freddie Freeman as I look through baseball? But could you get a 5th starter? Could you get another bullpen arm? That's where I see this team could really make an impact. You could think, well, maybe Thomas Hatch could be that. He played a lot in the minors last year. They stretched him out. Nate Pearson, he's a fun project, but he seems to get hurt every time he gets to the big leagues. To be quite honest, to me, I position Nate Pearson to be my closer of the future. I think Nate Pearson for the Toronto Blue Jays could be a 8th, 9th inning guy. In some games, he's a guy that gets you 3-4 outs because he's got such heat. I think he could be an Aroldis Chapman, if you will, because he throws so hard, but yet he can throw like an 85-mile-an-hour splitter. So I just think for his game, it's not going to be, okay, can you give us 6-7 innings tonight? I think it's going to be, hey, could you get us out of this jam that the hold guy left us in? Get us out of this inning. Come pitch the 9th. We'll move on. So, again, there's 200 free agents. And just focusing on the AL East, I think the Blue Jays will be competitive. I think the Red Sox will be competitive. I don't think they'll be as good as they were last year. I think the Rays are always competitive. You can look at them and say, who's this guy? He'll play great. So I think the Rays will be good. Baltimore will stink. That's guarantee. But Rays, Yankees, Blue Jays, Red Sox, all these teams should be pretty good. It's just putting yourself in the best position to win. And I'm not a Toronto sports fan. I don't root for anybody. I root for content, as you guys all know. To me, even with not getting another 5th starter, which I think would help, I think the Toronto Blue Jays are the best team in the American League East. And that's on paper, and paper's worth nothing. It's worth a lot if you're stuck in the woods, but it's worth nothing right now. But I look at Vladdy, I look at Bichette, Barrios, Gausman, Manoah. They have names that really make you think. The Yankees do too, with Stanton and Judge and Jerry Cole. But I just like the depth of the Blue Jays a little more. If anything, their infield, they could improve their third baseman. That's always seemed to be something that's lacking on this team. But I do think they're going to be right in the American League. The American League Central is really weak. The Guardians, formerly the Indians, aren't what they used to be. They were always winning that division. They're always good. The Twins hit a ditch last year. They had a terrible season. The Tigers, oddly enough, could be a team that pushed. They had a great season despite missing the playoffs, but they took steps. The Tigers could be a team to push for a wild card spot. Chicago White Sox, Tony La Russa is back. I think the White Sox will be good again. The Astros are always good. They lose players. They've lost players the last number of years, but they seem to plug and play. They still have Altuve. They still have Brantley. Justin Verlander's coming off Tommy John surgery. So they should still be good. But if I'm the Toronto Blue Jays, I look around and say, why not us? Yes, Oakland's good. Yes, Houston's good. But we have better players than they do. Vladdy could win an MVP as soon as this year. He could tail off just as easily, too. How good a shape did he stay in? That's a big question. I haven't seen many pictures of him. We don't know. But he's got all the tools to be a superstar. To be, honestly, and I don't say this just for fanfare, just because it's the Blue Jays. I think Vladdy, if he can learn English better, and I say this all the time, and I truly mean it, in any sport in North America, if you want to be the star, if you want to be a guy that people clamor for, that people really like, you have to be fluent in English. I mention the UFC all the time. It's the same thing right here. If Alex Ovechkin's a star, he always was, but you ask him for a comment now, you can understand what he's saying. Before, it was a butchering of the English language. And you're like, okay, well, I don't really care. If Vladdy can learn English and he's, at least fluent in the language, Dominican is his first language. And it's tough to learn another language. I remember taking French in high school. I've lost a lot of it. So it's easier said than done. But I think if he can master the English language, really figure that out, and continue to be a superstar, hit 50 home runs, get 100 RBI, bat 330, he can be the face of baseball. Easily. Because David Ortiz was really one of the faces of baseball. He was a designated hitter. He didn't have to be fantastic on the bases. He wasn't Javi Baez. He wasn't a great fielder. But he was a name. He had a big smile. And he was a superstar in the clutch moments. That doesn't hurt either. Maybe Vladdy gets the Blue Jays to the playoffs. He gets a big double. He has his Joe Carter moment. Then he's on top of the world. Then it doesn't matter if you're a small market in Canada. Then the mothership's going to talk about you. Then Fox is going to have a preview of the game. They're going to talk about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Because despite Vladdy being the better player, I think Bo Bichette is the more recognizable, is the most talked about person on the Blue Jays roster right now. For good reason. He's a really good player. I do think he still has to prove to everyone that he is an everyday shortstop. I think he'd be better at second base, but I understand why he doesn't want to give that position up. I mean, you've seen everybody coming up. They want to be a shortstop. Manny Machado never wanted to be a third base. Tried to move to short, couldn't play it. He eventually said, okay, I'll be a third baseman. He's the third baseman now in San Diego. Fernando Tatis Jr., who I think is the face of baseball right now. I think he's going to be a right fielder because he struggles at short. In the amount of games he played last year, he had the most errors at the position. He was a terrible fielder. So Bo is better than Tatis, better than Machado was when he was trying out the experiment in Baltimore and then ultimately in LA when he was dealt at that trade deadline. But I think Bichette still has to prove it. He's got a great bat, but if he can be the in Canada, in Toronto, just to paint this picture, if he can be the Mitch Marner to Vladdy's Austin Matthews, then you don't have a problem. Then you have a two-headed monster. You have Bichette bat second, you have Vladdy bat third, maybe 3-4, however you want to set it up. And you got George Springer in between them or right behind them. That's a three-headed monster. Because Springer, I think, is still going to play at a high level for a number of years. He had some bad luck last year, injury-wise. He just never got healthy. And they're still a game away from making the playoffs. But if he can have a healthy spring training, if he can be ready come game one, you have a healthy, fit Vladdy, you have a Bo Bichette, you're set up pretty well. Again, I think their third base position could be, I don't see Kevin Biggio as the future third baseman. I really don't see Kevin Biggio as a future anything. I think he's a utility player at best. He could be an everyday player on a bad team. But if he wants to be a Toronto Blue Jay long term, he's not playing third base. He's not playing second. He's not going to play first because that's where Vladdy's playing, and he's not a great fielder. Defensively, he's weak. That's not his game. And when you don't have a great bat and you don't really have a set position, unless you're Ben Zobrist, you're not going to play that much. You're going to be in and out, come in off the bench. But we'll see. But that's just the Blue Jays. That's just where they are. We still have a lot to figure out here when it comes to baseball. There's no set date for opening day yet. When I find out that information, I'll let you know. Oh, actually, we do have news here. So I was right. Opening day. This is brand new news, and I'm reading it on the fly. Opening day moves to April 7th. Fantastic. That's less time than I thought. So I love this news. That's less than a month away. Baseball, great. Love that. And a full 162, go figure, as I just said, will be played. Spring training camps open with a March 11th voluntary report date, which is tomorrow. And March 13th, mandatory date. Spring training games start March 17th. Free agency to begin immediately once CBA is ratified. Playoffs expand to 12 teams beginning this season. The National League adopts the designated hitter starting this season. CBT expected to begin at $230 million and grow to $244 million. So lot to chew on there. I would say the biggest thing is like I just said, 160. I knew that would happen. March 13th is the mandatory spring training date. So that's Sunday. It's even earlier. So I'm glad they're getting in there early, one day earlier than I predicted. Spring training games start March 17th. So that would be a week from today. So they're going to happen right away. And opening day moves to April 7th. So it was supposed to be March 31st, I believe, or March 30th. So that's only a week later. So that's not really a big deal. To me, the biggest change of all of this, the playoff 12 teams, I don't love it personally. But I understand it. This is happening in every sport. You see the play-in in the NBA. It's extra game. It's extra revenue. TV partners love it. In the NBA, TNT, the mothership, they get to show that 9-10 playoff game, which it is what it is. But it's a game. In this case this year, the Lakers are going to be playing in it. So LeBron's going to be in it. So that it'll do good ratings. But in baseball, you get extra teams make the playoffs. Maybe last year under this format, the Blue Jays would have made the would have made the playoffs. The San Diego Padres, where Fernando Tatis Jr. would have made the playoffs. So and plus we get an extra wild card game, and you can throw a Vladdy Guerrero or a Fernando Tatis Jr. or a New York Yankee in that game. That'll do good ratings. In baseball, you got to have the teams. You do. You got to have more than the other sports, I believe, because if it's a wild card game and you see Cincinnati versus Kansas City, I don't think anybody cares. But 12 playoff teams, more markets get into the playoffs, more fan bases are excited down the line. I will say for baseball, with the playoff expansion, as just agreed on in the new CBA, it's something that is good for the sport in a sense, because even though I don't love it, it's because it's 162. It's really tough to be a fan if you know your team's out of it come, season start April 7th this year. If it's May 25th and your team's out of it, that's a long slog to go through. To sit through that season where your team stinks and they're not going to make the playoffs, and you have to most people aren't going to watch every day. Most people aren't that interested because you're like, well, I'll wait till next year, or I'll wait till after the trade deadline when we trade awesome players and our youngsters get called up from AAA. So, if any sport, baseball needs more playoff teams because it needs more eyeballs. It needs more people to care and people to watch as the season gets deeper and deeper. But the biggest thing for me is that the National League adopts the designated hitter starting this season. To be honest, I liked having a designated hitter in the American League and having the pitchers hit in the National League. And that's a traditionalist thinking, but I'm very much a traditionalist. I am not technically that old when it comes to spectrum. I'm 23, even though I feel like I'm getting older every day. Well, I am, but I feel like I'm really getting older. But I'm a traditionalist. I never want the NHL playoff format to change, ever. I love it. There's oftentimes it may go to fifth overtime like it did a few years ago. I'm okay with that. I watched that whole game, loved it. I don't mind seeing pitchers hit. One of the craziest games I can remember, it was on an opening day a number of years ago, and I went to my friend Nick's house, and we used to watch every opening day together. We used to, really enjoy that day. And that day was San Francisco at Chavez Ravine playing the Dodgers. And the first at bat for Madison Bumgarner, he hits it deep off Clayton Kershaw. A pitcher off a pitcher. And then Kershaw comes up the next inning. He takes Bumgarner deep. Again, a pitcher. So 2 home runs by pitchers. But then later in the game, Bumgarner takes Kershaw deep again. So Bumgarner hits 2 home runs. That's 3 home runs by pitchers. And I get it. This doesn't happen every time. But it was riveting. It was fantastic. And we're not going to be able to see that anymore. I remember Marcus Stroman for the Blue Jays a number of years ago. They're in an interleague series. He gets a double. He gets himself on base, ends up scoring the winning run of the game. So I think you're taking away those opportunities. And I'm sure some pitchers are really happy. John Lester's probably pissed off that he's retiring now when he wished this had happened 15 years ago. But this obviously opens up opportunities for different teams. I think it hurt National League teams in a sense to sign players because you couldn't sign a guy unless you could play a position. I look at Freddie Freeman. He's the top free agent available. Freddie Freeman's a first baseman, and I still think he's a very good first baseman. But if you were a National League team, you said, well, Freddie Freeman's in his mid-30s. How much longer is he going to be able to play first base at a high level? I think that was a question mark. And now you can say, well, we can sign him for 5 years because we still think he's going to have really good bat speed. We still think he's going to be superb. And now you can say, well, he can play for a couple years and we can shift him to DH. He can be a Miguel Cabrera. Miguel Cabrera could play in Detroit because he could be first baseman when he first got there, and then he pivoted to DH. Victor Martinez played 5 years with the Detroit Tigers. He never played a game other than designated hitter. But that's a big change to baseball, having designated hitter fully implemented starting this season in both the American League and the National League. Again, I don't love it, but I think it's a fair level playing field for these National League teams to sign free agents in order for them to attract guys that maybe wouldn't be able to, play first base, play their position for so much longer. Now you have the flexibility to say, well, even if their play drops off, even if they aren't as good as we thought they were going to be, well, we can shift him to DH in a couple of seasons. We can replace him in that position. He can be our DH, and you're not stuck with that player. So that's an interesting angle to this. But again, the news of the day so far, the Major League Baseball, the union, have agreed to end the lockout. Opening day is going to be April 7th, full 162-game season. Voluntary spring training starts tomorrow. Mandatory spring training report time is Sunday with spring training games scheduled to start a week from today, March 17th. So baseball is moving quick. I think half of this is they were really close last night, and then Rob Manfred had to come out and push games back. But also, I think they're hearing fans. People are pissed off. People are upset with this. And they're tired of there's no baseball. There's nothing positive coming out of it. And I think you also got to look in the mirror and say, are people going to watch us when we come back? Are people going to care? And now, I said this from day one when I talk about these negotiations. Now what baseball needs to do, more than anything, is focus on the game. Okay, you have your money stuff done. Minimum salary for players, great. You got your CBT, great. Designated hitter, that might help play. Because I think the National League, I think a lot of complaints as well, it's just a free at bat. So you got to change the way you pitch at guys in the National League. But now make your game faster, make it more entertaining, make it fun for people to watch. That's what needs to be the focus now. Money's done. Collective bargaining is over. Get to spring training. Now, union, baseball, make changes so that people care about your game. People want to watch it. People show up on the couch and they have a good feeling about it. That's my thought today. Do something to get people to care about your sport, to get more viewers, so that the next generation is not just watching basketball. Because basketball is fun. Basketball has John Morant, has Steph Curry. It's fun. Baseball, all they talk about is money. And, it's another double. It's another, we hit into a double play. And there's just nothing that appealing about it. Well, they need to figure it out here. That's what they need to focus on now. Money's done. Your egos probably both sides, your ego's hurting right now. But the game's coming back. Now what can you do to make it more entertaining? That's what they need to figure out. That needs to be the plan of attack. Not dollars and cents, but asses in seats and eyeballs on television screens. But like I said, baseball will return April 7th. Good news for everybody involved, and we'll be covering it. We'll be talking about it here on To The Point. Where do I want to pivot next? I mean, there's still a lot of good stories today. Let's talk about, I look at, tennis is such an obscure sport. It's one that I really like, but it's not one talked about on a daily basis. But I want to bring it up here for a minute because there's still, the world's changing. I just talked about this with the mass leaving in New Brunswick, and COVID's really a thing of the past. And you see pictures in Florida, and you see what's happening in certain places there. The world's a different place. But in tennis and in parts of the United States and a lot of these major sports leagues, COVID is still on the horizon. You look at Kyrie Irving in basketball. He can't play home games. He can't play in Canada. There's a few places around the world he can't play. Tyler Bertuzzi in the NHL can't come up and play in Canada. A few other spots in the United States. But you kind of forgot that a few months ago that Novak Djokovic, the then ranked number one tennis player in the world, could not compete at the Australian Open. You kind of forgot that he battled, he went through visas and he went in front of the court and eventually was deported from Australia a day before the opening round of the Australian Open. And you might remember seeing Rafa Nadal come back and win that major, pick up his 23rd major of his career, and really, for now, cement himself as the greatest tennis player of all time. But you thought, well, that was then. Things will change. Novak Djokovic, The world's changing. He has to go through it now, take it on the chin, he'll come back. Well, in the next 2 weeks, there are two of the biggest tennis tournaments outside of majors all year. I think they're the two biggest, and they're at Indian Wells in California, and it's the Miami Open, which will start in mid-March. And yesterday, Novak Djokovic announced that he will not be competing at either because of his vaccine status. It is a requirement to be vaccinated to compete in these events, to participate because of health and safety. He's choosing not to, so he will not be competing at these events. And I'm not gonna give my opinion. I'm not gonna give a take on whether I think this is fair to him or I've said before, I don't like Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic is a lot like Aaron Rodgers. A lot of what comes from his mouth is horse shit, and quite frankly, I don't have enough time of the day to worry about Novak Djokovic. But what I do find interesting, what I do find compelling, is the fact that this is really starting to affect him, because Novak Djokovic just parted with his head trainer, who he's been with for 15 years. He's not competing in Australia, his favorite event. He's not competing at Indian Wells or Miami, which he won. Indian Wells was the runner-up at the Miami Open last year. So 2 of these 3 tournaments he won last year. The other, he was a runner-up. He's not competing at any of them this year. He's competed in one event this season. He lost in the quarterfinal to unranked Yuri Vesely. And what's even more fascinating is, he might not be able to play at these events. These are the only tennis events this month. So he won't be playing in the month of March. We get to April. It's really up in the air with these events in Europe. It's still undecided. It's going to come down the wire for these tournaments to decide whether they want to welcome Novak Djokovic. I think the more we see tournaments like Indian Wells, Miami, say no to Djokovic, I think it hurts his chances of competing in other events. But even say he can compete at the French Open, which is end of May, early June. Well, if he's not playing tennis, if he's not playing regular opponents, it hurts him in his chances of winning a major, obviously. And that's the biggest thing here. Okay, not winning an Indian Wells trophy, not winning a Miami Open. In the grand scheme of things, it hurts his prize money, probably hurts his pride, and it gets him another headline because he can bitch and complain, and the people that love him, the people that slurp up his comments, can defend him and can grovel with him the fact that he can't compete at these tennis tournaments. But for Djokovic, we all know he's an athlete. He's competitive. I think it's stewing with him right now that Rafael Nadal got to 23 majors before he did. I think it really bugs him. I think he's sitting there spewing over the fact that Rafa Nadal, who hadn't won in Australia in a decade, won his tournament. He got the one-uppings on Nadal last year when he won the French. But Nadal is the best player on one particular surface in the history of tennis. Djokovic is great on hard courts. He's not better than Nadal is on clay. There's anybody who debates that, I'll have that debate with you. It's not close. But even if Djokovic was playing every tournament, the odds of him winning the French are very unlikely. To me, the one thing I could complain about is him not playing regularly. It makes the French very anticlimactic. I root for content. I root for storylines. Even if Djokovic is there, like I said, he would not be the favorite. But if he's not there, Rafa is on clay. I think Rafa will run through the French Open. Daniil Medvedev, that's his worst surface. Roger Federer is not playing. May never play again. Dominic Thiem didn't play the Australian. We'll see if he can come back. He's very good on clay, but he's lost to Nadal in the final twice. Zverev is going through his own trouble right now. He's on probation after snapping at one of the last tournaments he competed in. So, Novak Djokovic was a guy that people really didn't like because he was in with Nadal and with Federer, who were beloved. I think he's even more disliked now. I think the last couple of years have only hurt his reputation more, for better or for worse. You might think there's people, and these people kind of bother me. The people that really that aren't that negative against COVID before, but then you see that a guy's got tough restrictions, so then you become a champion for his cause. You see this with Aaron Rodgers. There was people that were rooting for Aaron Rodgers, cheering him on. Particularly people in the media, I'm not going to call them out right now, but that were champions for Aaron Rodgers who aren't Packers fans just because he chose not to get vaccinated and he was sticking it to the man. Well, you didn't like him before. You thought he was a loser before. You were probably rooting for the Cowboys. I'm thinking to some of these media guys. You work for Fox. You're either rooting for the Cowboys or you're rooting for the Giants. That's all who they hire. So you didn't care about Aaron Rodgers. But then, Aaron Rodgers went against the grain. Aaron Rodgers they're playing against his human rights. Novak Djokovic, poor guy. Well, he was a dick before. That's the majority of the people's opinion of him. But now, he's like me. He's like-minded, or he had the courage to do what I couldn't do because I had to keep my job. And it's stupid. It's petulant. But that's what I feel about both of these guys. They're getting sympathy. They're getting more, they're getting negative love from people that just spew off hate, from people that probably have Twitter accounts that are, just losers that are saying really poor things about groups of people. And again, this is a deeper conversation. But to me, this Djokovic thing, it's less about Indian Wells. It's less about the Miami Open, which is what's pertinent right now. But the bigger deal is, what happens to Novak Djokovic in 2 months when we get to the French Open? Is he playing any events before? Is he allowed to play there? Is England going to allow him to play? Because right now, England is full go. You don't need a vaccine passport. So he could travel, he could visit England today. But Wimbledon, it's his own entity. That's what's different. He could go to Miami. He could be on a beach right now. But the Miami Open, Wimbledon, the French Open, Roland Garros, these big, tournaments, these companies, they make their own rules. It's not, to get into the country, but if they're wide open, it's your call. Because as far as I know come Monday, Monday ending the masks here in New Brunswick, but the following Monday, it's free reign. You don't need a vaccine passport. But it's my understanding if you want to go to a Wildcat, it's up to the Moncton Wildcats to say, you need a vaccine to get in here. So that's what interests me with tennis right now. I mean, Leylah Fernandez wins last week for the women. And just when it comes to Canadian women, she's obviously a big story. She's a highlight that makes you want to keep watching. She's spunky. She's fun. But, all you've seen from tennis this year is Nick Kyrgios winning the doubles, which was fun. Djokovic's big hoopla not being able to play, him complaining about it week after week. Rafa with his epic comeback, which is great. Zverev losing his mind, acting like a petulant child. And you go through it. But I'm not going to dwell on Djokovic. Do I care how many majors he gets? Yeah, because I think when it comes to his play, I think he's the best. But I'm very clear on something. If you don't have the most majors, you're not the best. It's an individual sport. It's different from team sports because I think you could argue that LeBron's better than Jordan. I wouldn't make that argument, but I'm not going to be against somebody that runs that by me. But in an individual sport where it's just you and just your opponent, having the most majors means you're the best, quite frankly. To me, that's all that counts is winning. It's you against one opponent. You don't have to rely on your fourth line winger to get the puck out of the zone. It's what can you do to help me win today? And I look forward to watching this tournament. Like Nick Kyrgios is in action tonight. He's playing at Indian Wells. We're gonna see, Shapovalov, Auger-Aliassime, Medvedev at these events. So, that's something that's on TSN, men's and women's tennis. That's something that'll be talked about and I'll be looking at the next couple of weeks. And then there's also other events like, NCAA conference tournaments, which I mentioned me and Matt Wright are going to talk about more in depth tomorrow. But, you have crazy, buzzer beaters every night. This weekend is one of the funnest in college basketball because teams are battling to get into the tournament. Teams are battling for seeding. Like today, Arizona is the number 2 team in the country. They have 3 losses all year. 6 minutes. See, I'm looking at their game right now. 6 minutes left, and 6 minute 19 left. They're only up 5 against Stanford, who are a 500 team. That's what can happen. Georgetown, who had a terrible season, nearly upset Providence, just escaped Butler today. Kansas is dominating West Virginia, to be expected. But as I looked through today, I was watching some college basketball before I left. Duke up by Syracuse, but it was a tight game. Texas A&M beat Florida in overtime. TCU upset number 22 Texas. Miami just won in overtime against Boston College. Boston College was a 12 seed. So that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm excited about tonight, to watch some of that. And this weekend, like Oklahoma is playing Baylor tonight. I expect Oklahoma to win. Baylor is 3 wins over 500. I think Oklahoma's going to get into the tournament, but it wouldn't hurt them to go on a great run here in the Big 12 tournament. I think it'll be a close game against Baylor, even though Baylor's the number 3 team in the country. Also tonight, I look at UCLA, Washington State. That's a game that shouldn't be close. I think it will be. I could smell upset. North Carolina's got Virginia. Virginia just escaped with a win last night. I like Texas Tech. They're one of my teams I really like. They can't score, but they're a good team. I think Iowa State beats Texas Tech tonight in the Big 12 tournament. There's a prediction for you. But tomorrow, me and Matt Wright will get into March Madness more. It's a tournament I love. I really get into it. Even if you don't follow college basketball, you can fill out a bracket. You'll learn about players that'll be in the NBA soon enough that you'll follow. There'll be drama. Duke, it's Coach K's last season. As he goes through this tournament, the ACC tournament, we expect him to win it. They expect him to win this tournament and to go on a deep run in the NCAA tournament. But every game Duke plays could be Coach K's last. He's retiring at the end of the year. If that's not a reason to watch a game, I don't know what is. And what a story it would be if he walked off with another NCAA tournament. And it could happen. A lot of years, Duke could win it. I believe they could this year because they have a really deep team. They're really good. But they just as easily could be out in the Elite 8 or the Sweet 16 because, honestly, I think the best team out there is Gonzaga. But Gonzaga has been a number 1 seed the last 4 or 5 years. They're always right there. They're always an elite team. Duke beat Gonzaga really early in the season. It was a fantastic game. It was out in Vegas, neutral site. Maybe we see them meet again in this tournament. I'd love to see it. Because I think both teams are better, obviously, now than they were back then. Chet Holmgren has only improved. Drew Timmy's still on Gonzaga. Panchero looks good. You got Trevor Keels at Duke. Auburn is a good team in the SEC. Even though they kind of scare me because I don't know how good they're going to be. I don't know if they're going to win the SEC tournament. I really have my doubts that they will. So it's all up in the air. It's all we think we know who's good. We think we know who's going to win. Do we really? No, not really. The only thing we know is we know it's going to be chaotic. we know it's going to be entertaining. And that's all we can root for tonight. I'm going to get to a cool story, a New Brunswick story in a second here. But tonight in the NHL, there's some Colorado, Carolina should be a fun game. You got Tampa in Florida. There's some of the heavyweight teams. You got Toronto, obviously, he's got Arizona tonight. So there's some fun games to look forward to. But one game that is kind of on my horizon that's got me a little interested is Vegas at Buffalo. And again, that doesn't sound like a sexy matchup. That sounds like a Noah special, I will admit, to keep your eyes on. But it'll be Jack Eichel's return to Buffalo tonight. And there was actually a couple returns tonight. Only one player is playing in it. But Jack Eichel returns to Buffalo, first time since the trade. He is been in Vegas. It's been kind of hit and miss. He's still trying to work his way back to the lineup following his big surgery. Alex Tuch, Peyton Krebs have been playing in Buffalo. They've gone through their up and downs. Buffalo is still in a rebuild, still battling through it here. But I'm interested to see the crowd reaction to Jack Eichel. The way that it ended, I don't think Jack Eichel should be remembered as a failure in Buffalo. I think Buffalo should be looked at more as a failure in what they did to him. Eichel had some really good seasons in Buffalo. Do you ever think he lived up to being a second overall pick? No. I don't think he ever was a guy that you'd say was a top 10 player in the world. I don't think he ever was a game changer. But he had 30-goal seasons. He got to 90 points. He was really good. Never got the team to the playoffs. But you also got to look around and say, who did Jack Eichel have with him? What kind of teams did he have? What kind of management was around to help build a team? And Buffalo doesn't have a great home crowd. They don't win, so they don't draw a big circus. I do think there'll be a bigger crowd tonight now that Eichel's returning, however. I assume they'll acknowledge him even though they had a nasty divorce. I think they'll want to be classy with him coming back. But I'm interested to see how the crowd reacts to him. I don't think it should be all negative. I don't think it should be, Ben Simmons in Philadelphia, per se, where the guy basically just quit on the team, said, I'm not playing. Jack Eichel had a legitimate injury. He needed a spinal fusion in his back, and they disagreed on the treatment method. And I understand where Eichel's coming from. He doesn't trust the organization anymore. He doesn't think they're doing the best things for him, and he wants his own doctors. That's understandable. I understand where Buffalo's coming from. They're like, hey, we want you back as soon as possible. We're not sitting around paying you so that you can go on lavish vacations, take the surgery when you want. So I see it from both sides here. But ultimately, this is a big game because Vegas needs to win. Vegas they're in a playoff race. They need every win that they can possibly get. Every game is a must-win down the stretch here for some of these teams. Edmonton, Vegas, LA to a certain extent. I mean, you look in the Pacific. LA is a 3-point gap on Vegas. They have a 5-point gap on the Edmonton Oilers for second in the Pacific. Vegas only has a 2-point gap on Edmonton, a 4-point gap on Vancouver. These games are vital to them. They play tonight and tomorrow. They'll have 22 games left after tomorrow night. They're in Buffalo tonight, Pittsburgh tomorrow. They're on an East Coast road trip. But the more that Edmonton wins, and the more they get more desperate. You need to keep winning because you're only a point above these teams. You're only a couple above Edmonton, like you said, only a couple above Vancouver. You need to keep these teams at an arm's distance. You need to stay ahead of them in the standings because then you won't be in the playoffs, and it'll be a disastrous season for the Vegas Golden Knights. But I do think after tonight, they'll have 22 games left. Jack Eichel's coming off a big injury. He's had his time just to kind of fit in, play hard, start figuring out rehab, come back. You've had the necessary games. But now this is This is time for him. It's time for Jack Eichel to be the man and to lead this team down the stretch. He has 7 points in 10 games. Needs to be better than that. Has to be better than that. They've scored 3 goals in their last 2 games. He's got 1 point. They scored 2 against Ottawa. They scored 1 against Philly. You can't lose to Philly this late in the season. You're playing Buffalo tonight. You can't lose to Buffalo. Leonard's hurt, so Brossoit's going. Doesn't matter. But Mark Stone's not playing. He's the heartbeat of that team. He's the best player on that team right now. Eichel might be eventually. He's not right now. But Eichel, Riley Smith, Bill Carlson, this is time to wake up, start scoring some goals, and play better. Because, quite frankly, the Vegas Golden Knights are better than the Edmonton Oilers. They have better goaltending, they have a better back end, and they have more depth up front. So allowing a team like Edmonton to jump you in the standings, to make the playoffs and you for naught is a huge disaster. And I've said this the last couple times I've had people, I'm worried about Vegas. I don't think they're a particularly great team. I don't like their fundamentals. I don't love their goaltending. If I'm a team of all of them, like I'm sure Edmonton would love a goalie at the trade deadline. Koskinen's been playing pretty good lately, but he still lets in a stinker every night. Did last night to Backstrom. I'm sure you'd love a goalie upgrade. I think Leonard's, you never know what you're going to get with him. Is he healthy? Is he not? And do you trust him to get you deep in the playoffs, even if you get there? I have my doubts about that. So I think Vegas should inquire about Marc-Andre Fleury. It's a big salary. You got to move money out to do it. But it's something you should kick tires on, because if you don't make the playoffs, the heat is on, and that the team is, who knows where that's going to go. But as much as it's the Eichel homecoming tonight, the game is more about Vegas finding their game, Vegas winning. They beat Buffalo tonight. They beat Pittsburgh tomorrow on a back-to-back, which is easier said than done. They're second in the Pacific. They'll jump Anaheim when it comes to points. They'll jump LA. LA will have a game in hand, but they'll be second. It's only a 3-point gap. But a 3-point gap can become 5 or 7 real quick. LA's got San Jose tonight. Edmonton, they're idle tonight. They're traveling back out west. They have Tampa Saturday night. It's not an easy game. Really not an easy game. But you put yourself in this position. You put yourself in a position where you need to win. So it doesn't matter who you're playing. It doesn't matter that, we need Jack to ease back. No. Backup goalie. There's no excuses anymore. You can say what you want about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm sure Leaf fans are a little pissed off at the team and you're worried about them. But you've given yourself enough of a cushion where you don't have to worry about missing the playoffs. There's teams like Vegas. There's teams like Minnesota. There's teams, really no team in the East, oddly enough. But Edmonton, Minnesota, you haven't given yourself a cushion. You haven't put yourself in a great position. You need to win these games down the stretch. Doesn't matter about injuries. Doesn't matter about goaltending. Whatever the factor is. It's put up or shut up now. It's about making the playoffs regardless of the situation. That's what you need to do. That's what needs to happen. But I'm interested in watching what the crowd reaction is like to Eichel tonight. Great win for Edmonton last night against the Capitals. Really entertaining game. Like I said, I thought Koskinen played pretty well last night. And it's a real good story coming out of that game from, fellow New Brunswicker, Brad Malone from Miramichi, scores his first NHL goal in 1,288 days, which is fantastic, and gets a goal and assist last night. He came up big. McDavid scores the overtime winner. Really, Samsonov played a fantastic game. He kept Washington close, but credit to Brad. playing in Bakersfield, battling it out, and you're 32 years old. You're probably thinking, I'm never getting back to the NHL. But he grinds. He's having past 2 years were his career years in the American Hockey League. And Edmonton's depth starts to falter. He didn't stop in the American League. He kept pushing. He was a healthy scratch last weekend. Played Monday night against Calgary. He was a factor. Then he gets into the game again last night. He gets 2 points. So that's determination. That's New Brunswick right there, if you ask me. Him not giving up, seeing an opportunity, capitalizing on it. So kudos to Brad. And, kudos to this podcast, because we're going to announce this. Nobody's listening to this live, but if you hear this on the podcast, hear this later. Brad Malone's going to join the podcast next week. He's going to join me Monday around 5:40, 5:30, between 5:30 and 5:40. We're going to do a live interview. So that's Monday. Brad Malone, Edmonton Oiler. Ford will join us here on the podcast. I can't wait to talk to him. So excited for that interview, excited for that chat with Brad. We'll talk about his journey to getting back to the NHL, what he's had to kind of go through, what he's done. And, ultimately, Edmonton plays Saturday, like I said, against Tampa. So we'll recap that, and we'll go through what his goals are the rest of the season, what the team's hoping to accomplish, and just kind of the mood out there in Edmonton and how the team's feeling, all of that good stuff. So I'm looking forward to chatting with Brad. That'll be Monday here on To The Point. So that should be a ton of fun. Looking forward to that chat. I mentioned some good games tonight. I think Colorado, Carolina, to me, is right at the top of the list. And I can't wait to watch that one. Two of the best teams in hockey will link up tonight. Rangers Blues is another really good game. You got Shesterkin back in the net for the Rangers. He didn't play the other night. Georgiev got lit up. But two really good teams, two teams I see making the playoffs. And that's always fun to see two teams like that link up. You got Jets, Devils. I mean, the Jets are still technically in this playoff hunt, oddly enough. So we'll see what they can do. But when you look at it, Jets are currently 7 points out of a playoff spot. So they need a lot to go right. But you got the Devils. You got to win. I mean, they need a lot of help to make the playoffs. But who knows? You got Minnesota. They're playing tonight. They're 2 points behind St. Louis for second in the Central. And Nashville's only a point back of them. So it's going to be a race down the stretch in the Central. Because, St. Louis I think St. Louis, if they can get into the playoffs, are going to be a tough team to play against. We got Dallas and Nashville, both in the wild card spots right now, only a point up on Edmonton. Dallas is only a point up on Edmonton. They do have 2 games in hand, mind you, and they're 3 points up on Vancouver. But we also learned today that Dallas defenseman Miro Heiskanen, just a stud of a player, one of the great young defensemen in all of hockey, has mononucleosis. He is out indefinitely. He's on long-term IR. So he could miss a large chunk of the rest of this regular season. That's really going to hurt their team. And John Klingberg's still in the trade block. Will they move him? I mean, oddly enough, this freak injury, this illness could be something that changes their decision, what they do at the deadline. And I truly mean that. With him out, it opens up possibilities. You say, well, what do we do now? Are we going to make the playoffs without him? And is it better just to sell off guys? Is it better just to trade Klingberg? We get a first round, we get a haul for him, and maybe we can still we'll still battle it out without him. We just don't want him to walk for nothing because we know if we don't move him, he will. But Klingberg will be highly sought after because he's a good defenseman. I don't think he's a great one, but at this deadline, there's Sherratts, there's Mark Giordano's, there's Josh Manson's. Those guys are very much your stereotypical tough defensemen, play in tough positions. grind it out. Klingberg's more of a puck-moving defenseman. He's more skill-based. So I think if you're a team, that has interest and you have enough kind of rough and tough defensemen, if you're the Calgary Flames, for instance, they'd be more interested in John Klingberg than they would be in Josh Manson or player to be named later. Because I just think they have Goodbranson, they have Nikita Zadorov, and those two guys fit that bill. They don't need another one of those guys. But I think Klingberg could be a guy Calgary could look at. I think Klingberg could possibly go to the Florida Panthers. He's a guy that I think Florida has a good decor. It could always get better. So maybe they look at Dallas, say Klingberg's the best option. There's still Mark Giordano. I think he could possibly go back to Calgary. They could eat some salary there. But that injury, it's interesting. It could change what they're going to do. And maybe they're always going to trade Klingberg. I'm just speculating. I mean, I read the reports. I read all that crap. But it's also, well, could this work out where you say, okay, it was going to be really hard to part with this guy, but now we can because he's injured. Because he's out, we'll trade the other guy. And, Heiskanen's only got 4 goals. He's got 29 points on the season, but he's a stud. I think he's really good. He's a big impact on that team. They're going to miss him down the stretch, quite frankly. And now, to me, the biggest interest is what happens with Klingberg now that Heiskanen is out. Can Dallas right the ship? Maybe they say we can't trade Klingberg because we want to make the playoffs. We need Klingberg to play even more. I mean, he's going to play more minutes now, no doubt about it. I think you'll see Klingberg play more. Thomas Harley, if you don't watch a lot of Dallas hockey, I don't watch Dallas every night, but I do watch obscure teams. Thomas Harley he's a great defenseman. I remember talking to Shane Turner with Craig Eagles last year, and he's one of the head scouts there. He told me to watch Thomas Harley. He wasn't lying. He is a really good defenseman. He's the future of that defense. I mean, they still have Esa Lindell, Harley. They won't need it. They'll miss Klingberg, but with Heiskanen, Harley, Hakapanya, they got a good defense core down there in Dallas. So, but interested to see how they right the ship there, how they manage that. That injury could have big effects. Dallas is idle tonight, but again, they got to battle. It's all about battling through right now and what teams decide to do. Does Chychrun get moved? Does Klingberg get moved? I mean, Vancouver keeps winning. Are they going to move JT Miller? It's so hard to deal a guy when you're still in a playoff hunt. If they keep winning, which they seem to do every night right now, it's hard to pull that trigger. If you have teams that are losing and you're creeping up in the standings, it becomes even more difficult. I hear Max Domi's name. Well, Columbus is not making the playoffs. He's an unrestricted free agent. I think it makes all the sense in the world to trade him. If you're a team like that in Columbus, you trade off a guy like Max Domi because he's not a part of your future. You're not building with him as part of your core. But that's what interests me. I mean, I hope he can recover, obviously, Heiskanen, from that, but he should be okay. And, just the deadline's always interesting, but I do think I'm interested to see if that has any impact on how they treat this deadline, how they act with certain guys, and just the overall impact it has moving forward. We also have another news story here, breaking news. The Chicago Bears are finalizing a trade that will send 6-time Pro Bowl defensive end Khalil Mack to the Los Angeles Chargers. Sources tell ESPN's Adam Schefter. The Chargers are expected to send 2nd and 6th round picks in 2023 to the Bears in return for the 31-year-old Mack, a source said. Wow. This is interesting. If you can recall, Khalil Mack was in the Raiders organization, and he was dealt to the Bears as soon as John Gruden took the job. When he first got to Chicago, Mack was really a defensive player of the year candidate. He had 12 and a half sacks in his first year. But that was his only, his one and only double-digit sack season while he was a Chicago Bear. They did have a great defense when Chuck Pagano was there, and but I think the Bears obviously want to get rid of his salary, and I think the Chargers, they got Joey Bosa. So you're not necessarily asking Khalil Mack to be your top edge rusher, to be your top pass rusher. And that's a positive thing. I think you look at it and say, he only had 6 sacks last season, but they came in 7 games. So that's some really good production. It looked like he was going to have a great season. But you got Joey Bosa on the other side, who's a menace. You still have Brandon Mebane. The Chargers need to improve their pass rush because it's all about Bosa. It can be really tough when guys are just doubling, tripling him. So you can have Khalil Mack on the other side and Joey Bosa. That's a great 1-2 punch. You saw what it was like for Aaron Donald when they acquired Leonard Floyd from the same Chicago Bears. They had to respect Leonard Floyd a little more. So it allowed Aaron Donald to get more sacks. He had 12 and a half last year. And Leonard Floyd has had career highs in sacks every year since he became a Los Angeles Ram. So what this does is it helps the secondary guy the most. This will help. I think this will help Khalil Mack more than it will help Joey Bosa. But by osmosis, it helps Joey Bosa a little bit. To say there's a game where a guy's just winning off the line, he's getting quarterback pressure after quarterback pressure. Eventually, you got to say, well, we can't keep tripling. We'll double. And then the elite talent, which is Joey Bosa in this scenario, will eventually get maybe a one-on-one look. He might get, he might get a left tackle and then get a chip from a tight end. That's a better situation than getting doubled or a triple team. So this is the way to win in modern NFL. The way to win in modern NFL is get a really good quarterback, get a great left tackle, and get great pass rush. Well, I look at the Chargers. Do they have a great quarterback? Yeah. Justin Herbert is, we've talked about the AFC West this week because Russell Wilson became a Denver Bronco. I think Russell Wilson was the 4th best quarterback in the NFC West. He might be the 3rd best in the AFC West, just above Derek. I think Justin Herbert's better than Russell Wilson is right now. Justin Herbert's got Mike Williams. He's got Keenan Allen. Maybe they get draft a tight end. But I like Justin Herbert a lot. He still needs to learn how to win in the big moments, in those clutch scenarios. But he's a really, really good quarterback. So check at the quarterback position on how to win in modern day football. 2, great left tackle. Yeah, Rashaan Slater. Northwestern. You could say generation. They got him at 17. The guy allowed 2 sacks last year. He's just a statue over there. He's so big and strong. He protects the blind side, and he is a great pick. He's working out. And so quarterback, left tackle, check. 3rd part, pass rush to win in modern day football. Joey Bosa I don't think he's as good as his brother Nick, but he's damn good. And when the Chargers defense was elite, they had Joey Bosa in his prime and they had Melvin Ingram in his prime. Well, Melvin Ingram, he's not in his prime anymore. He did play some really good football in Kansas City last year, but he's not a Charger anymore. So you needed a partner. Well, Khalil Mack's 31. He isn't Khalil Mack of 22. But can he be can he be a second piece? I think he can. He's still very, very good. And this is what this division is going to have to do. I think if you're the Chiefs, but I applaud the Chargers. Keep doing this. You re-sign Mike Williams. You got Khalil Mack this week. To me, Kansas City is under fire. Yes, you've been to a lot of AFC Championship games in a row. Yes, you have Patrick Mahomes. You still have Tyreek Hill. You still have Travis Kelce. But you need to improve. You can't lose all your great defensive players and hope that it works out. Losing Tyrann Mathieu will hurt the Chiefs. He's the leader of that defense. Nick Bolton's a really good player. I just mentioned maybe they'll keep Melvin Ingram. Chris Jones can still play good football, but Tyrann Mathieu is the heartbeat of that defense. He's the leader. He keeps them motivated. You don't want to lose him. And I think it's a good chance they do lose him in free agency next week. We need to find a guy to replace him. You've got Orlando Brown Jr. franchise tag. That's a positive thing. But how about your running backs? Could you get a running back that could help out Patrick Mahomes a little bit? Could you go out and find somebody that is a better complement? That isn't, I mean, you could run the ball more. That's something I think Kansas City needs to figure out. But I look at Kansas, like Denver made their move. They got their quarterback. I still think they need a better pass rush. Khalil Mack would have been good in Denver as well, because I think he would have been good with Bradley Chubb. But the Chargers, Broncos, Raiders, and Chiefs all know that they have to get better here. You know, I'm looking at this article on ESPN where they predict where free agents will go. You get Atlanta Falcons with Juju Smith-Schuster. Arizona Cardinals, Carlton Davis, who is really good. But I'm looking around. Like Ryan Jensen's a center. He's really good. Where does he go? I think the Raiders could really use him. That's a guy I look at. As I see these top guys, Denver Broncos edge Hassan Reddick. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. He's a really good player. But to me, it's who can get the most talent? What can you do? Khalil Mack's a good addition, in my opinion. That's something that it makes a ton of sense. You want to get better. You want it. This division, you're going to need all the talent you can possibly get because your division is loaded. And Bobby Wagner's out there. Kansas City doesn't have a whole lot of money. I try to make it work and try to get Bobby Wagner. He's a leader of that defense. I would look at it. That's something. Chandler Jones. He's 32. He's an older pass rusher. I still think he can play if he's got a good partner. Like I just said. Vegas, they got Max Crosby, Mad Max. He could be a good addition there. Landon Collins just got bought out by Washington. He's a good safety. If they lose Matthew in Kansas City, do they sign Landon Collins? Potentially. I mean, there's all kinds of free agents available. And teams are going to go. Teams are going to lose pieces. They're going to get guys. But I just think this division in particular is going to be a dogfight. It's going to be fascinating to watch. What did the Colts do? Let's close out today's podcast talking about the Colts a little bit. I talked about the Colts yesterday getting rid of Carson Wentz. And do I think Carson Wentz is a great quarterback? I don't. But I think it also tells you what the Colts think of the AFC. And the fact that they have a really good roster. The fact that they have one of the best defensive players. They have some good skill position. But they don't believe Carson Wentz can get there. And you look around, you see Lamar Jackson, you see Josh Allen, you see Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, you name it. You feel the need to get rid of Carson Wentz, who's likely going to be better than any quarterback that they get now. Maybe there's a big splash quarterback I don't see coming. But you look at free agency, as much as I like porn star Jimmy, Carson Wentz is better. And when you look at the Colts, I like Chris Ballard. I think he's a pretty good talent evaluator. He's built a good offensive line. Should have built it while Andrew Luck was there, and maybe you wouldn't be having this problem with quarterback after quarterback. But they can draft players. Darius Leonard was a good pick. Quentin Nelson was a good pick. Ryan Kelly was a good pick. Michael Pittman Jr. was a good pick. So they draft Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin, was a really good draft. So they're great at making draft picks. But what you look at and say, are they becoming Denver 2.0? The Denver Broncos always have good teams, minus the quarterback. They always have great skill position players. They always have guys on defense who go, oh, if this team only had a quarterback, they could win a Super Bowl. I don't think the Colts have as good a weapon as Denver, but they have in the past. Last couple of years, they've had some really good teams. T.Y. Hilton in his prime was elite. Pittman, Zach Pass. Jonathan Taylor is on this team. I'll tell you what, if I'm a team that thinks I can win, Jonathan Taylor's on his rookie contract. I'm calling Indy and saying, what do you want from him? Because if you're going to stink, we want him. Because I want to win now. And you're wasting his prime if you throw out Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, or whomever you want to throw out there at quarterback. These are the Colts week one starters the last 6 years. 2016, Andrew Luck. 2017, Scott Tolzien. 2018, Andrew Luck. 2019, Jacoby Brissett. 2020, Phillip Rivers. 2021, Carson Wentz. 2022, it's not going to be Carson Wentz. I wrote down in parentheses, porn star Jimmy, because that's likely who it's going to be. Maybe it'll be somebody else. But there's no continuity. There's no quarterback. There's no great quarterback. You have a great team, but devoid of a quarterback. If I'm a team, I'm calling on Jonathan Taylor and saying, you're not going to be any good. This guy's great. The peak of his career is going to be wasted. Let us give you some draft picks. Then you can maybe draft a quarterback. Because that's how Indy does it. They drafted Peyton Manning. They drafted Andrew Luck. That's how they build teams. Denver finds their quarterback through trading for them. They traded for John Elway. They traded for Peyton Manning. They traded for Russell Wilson. We'll see how it goes. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to build a Super Bowl team. The past 2 years, teams that won the Super Bowl had really good rosters, and they either traded or they signed a free agent veteran quarterback that had already won a Super Bowl or were an elite talent. Stafford, Brady. New England had a quarterback they had for 20 years, and they built through the draft. They made quiet free agent signings. They didn't spend much money. They won. Baltimore, you could say both of their Super Bowls had great defenses and average quarterback play in Trent Dilfer and Joe Flacco. It's not all the same. I will say now, though, it's really hard to win a Super Bowl without a great to an elite quarterback. Because there were times where Matthew Stafford was only good to a great quarterback. Tom Brady was, I don't think either of the last 2 years, the quarterback that ultimately won the Super Bowl was that great, quite frankly. But you want him to be great in the regular season. He's going to need to be great in specific moments. Matthew Stafford was great in that playoff game against Tampa when he threw the ball down the rail to Cooper Kupp. Did he play fantastic in the NFC Championship game against San Francisco? No. But he was good enough in those moments to get there, to win the big game. So could Indy doesn't have a first-round pick. The draft's in a month and a half. They don't have a first-round pick in this draft, and they don't have a quarterback. If you trade Jonathan Taylor, you're getting a first-round pick. You have teams like Indianapolis. You have teams like Carolina. You're just lost in the wind. You're lost in the shuffle because you're sitting there with a good team with nothing to show for it. Because you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to get any better. So I don't know where this goes. We'll be back tomorrow. Matt Wright's going to join me. We're going to talk college basketball. We're going to talk some hockey. We'll talk football as well. We'll talk about the Leafs game. Jack Campbell, Rasmus Ristolainen signed an extension today. So we'll have lots to get into tomorrow. We'll recap the Players' Championship down in Florida. That's going on today. Just check the leaderboard before we sign off tonight. There's some weather delay early, but it was clear before I left. Tommy Fleetwood was in the lead. And as we sit, Tommy Fleetwood shot a 6 under today. Kramer Hickok is 5 under. You have Abraham Answer 4 under. Maverick McNeely's 4 under. Tom Hoagie, Rick Hovland, Keith Mitchell. So a lot of guys top. Canadian Taylor Pendrith is 3 under. So lots of guys top the leaderboard, and we'll touch on golf. We'll touch on hockey, amongst other things, tomorrow when Matt Wright joins me right here on To The Point at around 5:40, 5:45. But thank you all for joining today. Great show as always. Always fun to chat with you all. And we'll see you tomorrow here on To The Point.